Okay, we're on the air. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Newmarket Zoning Board of Adjustment for Monday, February 11th, 2019. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Never gets old. Next item is the review and approval of minutes from February 4th, 2019. They were circulated. Motion to approve is presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any changes, amendments, additions?
None that I have.
No, move accept as transmitted.
Seeing no further comment, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? James, you were not here,
Oh,
so you are abstaining.
I abstain. Yep.
Otherwise, it's 4-0 in favor. Agenda item number 3, regular business. This is the application of Kelby and Martin Ferwerda, continuation of a public hearing for an application for a variance from section 32-89 of the Newmarket zoning ordinance to permit a density of 6 residential units per acre where 2 are allowed, and a variance from section 32-56 table of permitted uses to permit a multifamily residential use. If the variances are granted, the lots will be combined. The lots are located at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension, tax map U2, lots 107 and 108 in the R3 zone. And the way we typically handle these things is the applicant will come forward. We've read all of the materials. We hopefully have all had a chance to go and drive by the lot to the extent you're not already familiar with it. I know I've walked, driven, ridden, jogged past there many, many times. So the applicant will come forward, present whatever information they want to present without actually reading the materials to us. When they're finished, we'll have public comment. There's a lot of people here, so what I'm going to ask people to do is, you want to speak, obviously, you're more than welcome to. Tell us your name and your address, just to confirm that you're a resident of the town, and give 3 minutes apiece for people, so everyone has a chance to speak. If you use up your 3 minutes, you want to come back and make further comment after everybody else has a chance to speak, you're welcome to do that as well. Once that's done and everybody has spoken, we'll close public comment and we'll have deliberations up here in public so you can all hear. We may have additional questions. And then we'll proceed to vote after that point, assuming it's not too late and I don't turn into a pumpkin. So, with that being said, Mr. Ferwerda, if you want to present whatever additional information you want to present, this is your chance.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, we're all breathing easier because we have 5 people tonight. I'll try to be brief. You people have all read the applications. I just want to pass around the picture of the mobile home, the single-wide mobile home that was on my son's farm. He's since removed it, and irregardless of what happens tonight, he's going to go either put another mobile home on it or build a house. I also am passing around the picture, and I have a copy for the audience. That's the mobile home that my son has torn down. This is the one I own, And if that second mobile home stays on the lot,
If I can ask you to go to the microphone so we
Yeah.
make sure that we capture, people at home can hear what you're saying.
yeah, if the
Thank you.
second mobile home, the blue one, stays on the lot, it's really a function of this meeting, because I'm 70 years old.
So this is two,
That is two,
this is
and
four.
that is four.
Four is one with the red pickup truck in it, for the
Right.
record.
And,
Okay.
and it's likely that four will stay if the application is denied tonight. Because quite frankly, at my age, I can collect in rents what I earn in Social Security, and I'm an old guy. You know.
You're not alone.
I know, but you know what I mean, Sheldon? When we were young, we had all this energy, but at this point, I also have a picture of not what we're gonna build, but an alternative to what's out there today. These are, I don't know if they're condos or apartments, they were built on Clay Street, all right? And ours would be different, and I don't think the only purpose, the only purpose to show you what sort of meaningful change we can make in the community if we're given a chance, all right? And I've also brought it out, there's some misunderstandings, they're not gonna be apartments, they're gonna be condominiums, and they're all gonna be resold, and they're meant to be middle-income condominiums, which is appropriate for what Newmarket is becoming. I've been in the area for 40 years, I lived up the street in Newmarket Road in Durham, and Newmarket of today is not the city it was 40 years ago. You know, at that point, it had lost its mills, its income base was declining, you had real problems in the school, it became I don't want to say dumping ground, but it was where UNH students would get into a house and you'd have 5, 6, or 8 people in a very small house, and all that's turned around. And you have to thank the people of the town who've had the foresight, their elected members, redevelopment of the mills, that was done by Schinberg, right, primarily? And it's really, the northern mills has really changed the town, and you can see that in the shopping center up there and what's going around on downtown. If we receive our relief, it's likely that we'll put 3 4-unit buildings on. I have a typical, this is not what we're gonna do, it's just meant to show that the buildings can easily sit on the land. All right? The land is 2 1-acre lots. That goes back to when the land was subdivided in the early 70s. Okay? A total of, I believe, 5 or 6 lots were subdivided off of that parcel. The parcels which front on Elm Street are a third or smaller, a third of an acre or smaller, and maybe less. Do you know what the acreage is of those lots? Are they a third of an acre? Or? They're small, and that's because they had access to city water and sewer. There was no city water nor city sewer on the Beach Street extension. Question?
Guys, hang on a second. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm kind of rambling on, so I'm not a public speaker. But anyway, to run to it. So you have the history of the land. It was subdivided in the early 70s. It had 2 single-wide mobile homes for 40 years. One's been torn down, the outcome is a function of what happens tonight. It's a unique opportunity, I think, to add real value to the neighborhood and to the town. We will have increased real estate values, and that, as it currently stands, all right, those 2 lots contribute $5,400 in real estate taxes combined. Now, that's with the torn down mobile home there. The taxes last year were $5,400 on the 2 lots combined. When we are finished, we expect that the total tax value, tax to the town, to be $105,000. We're going to put up 12 units. They're gonna sell for about $300,000 at the town rate of 2.925. That's $105,000. That's enough money to hire a new policeman, an additional policeman, hire an additional school teacher, hire, you decide how to spend the money. And the demand on town resources will be minimal because we're not bringing in low-income housing. We're building middle-income condominium housing, all right? We also will contribute about $27,000 to the town in impact fees that the town can use for the purpose that it deems fit. And the only reason I undertook this is because it was a unique opportunity. Both Mrs. Terrell had passed away, and Miss Everett, was that her proper name? She just passed away, and the family contacted us because they saw what was going on next door. I think it's a great town. I think we have an opportunity to add value to the town. I think we have an opportunity to increase the values in that area. I think it's a unique lot, and I think the board should grant the variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. At this point, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. We have received some written commentary on the application from Cliff Chase, from Sarah Callahan and Brian Hart, and from Jamie and Talisha Batcher. But anybody who wants to comment, you're more than welcome to step up to the microphone and tell us your name and address, and we're happy to hear you. Mr. Kefauver, good evening.
In the interest of expediency, I'll stand up and start babbling. Drew Kefauver, 50 Elm Street. Members of the board, I recommend that you do not grant this variance to the applicants for the following reasons. Based on criterion 2 of the application, the spirit of the zoning ordinance would not be observed. The ordinance is very clear about what is permitted within a 1-acre lot in the R3 zone, and that's a single-family home or 1 duplex per lot. Granting the variance would substantially increase the housing density on these lots. And based on criteria 5, unnecessary hardship has not been demonstrated. The property can be developed with multifamily dwellings within the existing zoning ordinance requirements. The increased density requested is exactly that. It is a request. The new village area has multifamily homes on individual lots. Granted, the lots are smaller than current zoning, but it's consistent with the existing zoning in that it's a multifamily on an individual lot. If the applicants had desired higher density, they could have purchased property in a neighboring zone, which allows that higher density. Do you have any questions?
Can you, for the record, your address?
50 Elm Street.
Okay. How long have you lived?
We've been owners since 1991. I lived there prior to that for 4 years as a college student.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Sure. Mrs. Booya, good evening.
Yes, that's me.
So what is your address?
Yes, I have that right here. For those who don't know me, I'm Sue Bullier. I live at 61 Elm Street in Newmarket. And my property is a direct physical abutter to the property at 2 Beach Street Extension.
Thank you.
I am a longtime resident of 61 Elm Street, having lived there for the past 38 years. And it was property that my late husband Tito purchased in 1967 and lived there until he passed away in 2012. I'm adamantly opposed to the variance application submitted, requesting the change in the permitted density limit for the proposed property, for the properties located at 2 Beach Street Extension and 4 Beach Street Extension, from the 2 residential units per acre allowed by Section 3289 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Newmarket, for the R3 zone in which these properties are located, to 6 residential units per acre. This variance application is a request for spot zoning within the R3 zone, and if approved, will only benefit the applicant and be a great detriment to myself, my property, the other abutters, and surrounding neighbors. The proposal before the board right now seeks to construct numerous multi-unit structures on two small single-family lots that are completely out of scale with the long existing residential neighborhood. The proposal would require massive excavation, filling, blasting, clear-cutting of old-growth trees from the existing lots, removal of their terrain and tree cover in close proximity to long-established residential uses and on the abutting properties, not just mine, but several of the other abutting properties. The applicant's design choice is what necessitates a significant deviations from the requirements of the zoning ordinance and results in a project of such density and mass that is completely out of character for the area. There is no question that the owner of 2 Beach Street Extension and 4 Beach Street Extension could build traditional homes that are consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood and which would respect their owner's property rights and our owner property rights. Instead, the new owners of 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension are proposing a use that represents more than the highest potential use of the property, asking for fundamental relief from the most basic provisions of the zoning ordinance that protect the integrity of the existing residential neighborhood and would allow for a project with such unreasonable density that it would change the daily use and enjoyment of every existing residential owner in the neighborhood. This is even though the owner is legally bound to know what legal requirements are before buying a property, as this owner has recently done. This is a classic case of self-created hardships. Excuse me, if I don't read, I will get tangled. In this case, the owner is looking for private zoning of his own properties, arguing that it should be entitled to similar density as the village. The only legitimate process to request this level of zoning relief is to propose a proper request to amend the zoning ordinance, which would then go through the normal public process. The current request before the zoning board fails on each of the 5 mandatory variance requirements. The height and mass of the proposed structures will dominate the site and the area and will alter the essential characteristics of the area. It is not in the public interest and will diminish the value of the surrounding properties in contrast to the spirit of the ordinance and does not do substantial justice, and there is no basis whatever in the record before the board for finding any findings of hardship. For all these reasons, the requests fail on every requirement and must be denied. And further to the variance requirements, the 2 lots in question and neighboring residential structures on Beach Street Extension are not included in the village zone, nor the abutting properties on Elm Street. Therefore, village density provisions do not apply. The 2 proposed 6-unit multifamily structures would contrast sharply with the composition and look of the Beach Street Extension, Elm Street, and Pine Street neighborhoods, where residents are owner-occupied single-family or duplex homes. Building single-family homes or duplex units at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension would be more consistent with the surrounding residential structures and would solidify the character of the neighborhood as it transitions to the village. The R3 zone is intended to serve as a transition zone, allowing the 2 proposed 6-unit multifamily buildings, and I understand now he has said he's talking about 3-4 units, but I didn't realize that. I was just going on what was in the application, so that's why I have 2 6 units in my comments. Allowing the 2 proposed 6-unit multifamily apartment buildings will intrude on the transition from a neighborhood of single-family and duplex homes to a neighborhood of primarily duplex homes. Granting this variance would negate an otherwise orderly transition to the village zone. It would impose misfit structures of a very different style and density into the neighborhood. Granting this variance would run contrary to the long-standing public interest of abutters and residents and negate the spirit of the ordinance. It would disrupt the neighborhood built and natural environment and undermine the intent of the R3 zone transition concept. Granting this variance would be an injustice to the abutters, neighboring property owners by previously single-family residents were on each lot. The applicant is requesting permission to house 6 times as many residential units per lot. This could potentially result in a population increase by a factor of 12, and I won't go into all the math, but it could be 48, 50, 60, 70 people, depending on how many people are in each unit. Would these new multifamily units be owner-occupied, as most of the homes are in the area, or would they be rentals, which would introduce a more transient population to the neighborhood? Again, I just heard Mr. Ferretta say he anticipates condos, so, but again, I did not know that when I wrote these comments. Eliminating a heavily treed green space and excavating the natural topography which together currently buffer noise, absorb water runoff, shelter wildlife, and secure the privacy of butters. Increasing traffic congestion on Beach Street Extension and creating traffic safety concerns where Beach Street Extension intersects with Elm Street, not to mention the potential for greatly increased traffic flow and congestion on neighboring Pine Street and Beach Street Extension and the south, and at the Beach Street Extension and South Pine Street intersection. Increasing railroad noise levels in the immediate neighborhood and beyond by flattening of the natural topography of the two parcels and eliminating the large stand of mature old-growth trees, both of which currently buffer railroad noise. Increasing an already significant snow and storm water runoff to the abutting properties on the downhill sloping side by constructing buildings with large impervious roofs and sizable asphalt surfaces to accommodate high-density residential units. Adding significant light and noise pollution from resulting exterior lighting, trash disposal, automobiles use in the area, and things such as that currently do not exist. What potential damages due to the blasting and or drilling will be done to our properties during the excavation of these two properties, and who would cover the cost of repairing any such damages should they occur? What are the potential liabilities are there from disturbing the former town dump, which was located in the vicinity of what is now 4 Beach Street Extension and 6 Beach Street Extension? I realize the dump was closed in 1950, but who knows what you could dig up. What will be uncovered if extensive excavation takes place in this area? How will the resulting runoff, residual pollutants impact neighboring properties in the adjacent marsh near the tracks? Who will be liable for the costs to remedy any issues that come up now or in the future related to this excavation? Despite claims by the applicant that the proposed high-density multifamily structures will enhance property values, abutters and neighbors who have been long-standing interest in our neighborhood have strong concerns about the negative impacts of excavation, tree cutting, construction, and significantly increased resident density and all its resulting conditions. Many, many more people, more vehicles, more noise, and so on, will have on the quality and serenity of our residential settings and our property values. In addition, the applicants claim that the proximity of the railroad right-of-way, the needed removal of rock and dirt create financial hardships that can only be overcome by high-density development. The applicant knew the location of the land, its makeup, and topography before it was purchased, and yet still chose to purchase the properties. They have taken on these conditions by choice. In essence, they have created self-imposed hardships. The conditions of 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension properties were not imposed upon them against their will. The presence of the railroad in the hill, referred to as a dirt pile in the application, don't make the parcels any more suited for currently restricted density use. Development concerns and anticipated hardships for myself and the other abutters on the downslope side, which would be the Elm Street side of the property, include, but are not limited to, the loss of natural screening and privacy, but from the cutting of the trees and the reshaping of the land to within the close proximity of our abutting structures. Residents of the proposed new multifamily units will directly overlook and look into our backyards and our homes. The increased noise and light of human activity levels will impact the existing peace and quiet of the abutting residents and will destroy the quiet enjoyment I and my neighbors have of our property, which now exists. The increased storm and water runoff, the urban sediment, gas, oils, salts, water, that sort of thing, from the proposed multifamily apartment buildings and the asphalt driveways and roadways will impact abutting lots on the downside slope. Decreased marketability of my property. Fewer potential buyers will want to purchase a property that's both next to the railroad tracks and has 12 multifamily units in very close proximity to my backyard, and at a very reduced selling price. The variance request refers to the grandfathered hardship of the railroad. At least one abutter experiences that hardship with a home directly next to the tracks. If this variance is approved, that homeowner will have the additional hardship of 12 multifamily units in very close proximity to their property and home. That homeowner is me. I do live right next to the tracks. The imposition of such a hardship is unfair and in the scale and density of the proposed 12-unit multifamily units does not meet the existing town zoning requirements. In the application, the applicant makes note that they are proposing a 100-foot setback from existing abutting residences. Setbacks are never measured from existing buildings to proposed buildings. Referencing this is an incorrect way to make it seem like the applicant is providing a 100-foot setback when in fact the proposed setback of structures from my property line is only 50 feet, one half of what the applicant has implied and minimal at best when used for high-density development. The variance application states the proposed 50-foot setback is for structures. What about other things such as roadways, parking areas, trash receptacles, light poles, which may be located between my property line and the building? How far away will they be from me? Development costs would be significantly lower if the properties were developed in accordance with the current and well-established town zoning. Low-density development could incorporate the current topography of the land and allow for the preservation of a much larger green space consisting of existing old-growth trees. In closing, the zoning ordinance of the town of Newmarket, zoning ordinances, of the town of Newmarket were approved by the residents of the town to protect current and future residents, specific neighborhoods of the town, and maintain the individuality and quality of life of each of the respective areas. By adhering to the current zoning regulations of the R3 zone and not granting this variance request would help protect and maintain the character of the Beach Street extension, Elm Street, and Pine Street neighborhoods as we know them. Yes, change and development happen, but please only allow change and development to occur in accordance with the currently approved laws, codes, and ordinances governing the town of Newmarket. Would you like a developer to put 12 multifamily units in your backyard where only a single or duplex family units are allowed? I suspect not. Do not let the hardships that will be imposed upon myself and the other abutters and residents of the Elm Street, Beach Street Extension, and Pine Street neighborhoods against our will and without our consultation be outweighed by the desires and choices made by the developer, or made by the applicant in his private spot zoning request. Therefore, I am asking the Zoning Board of Adjustment to deny the variance request for a change of density in the R3 zone from 2 units per acre to 6 units per acre for the properties at 2 Beach Street Extension and 4 Beach Street Extension. And just for the record, yes, I have consulted with a New Hampshire land use attorney who did help me with draft a small portion of this letter, but who could not attend to a previous commitment. So I respectfully submit my comments to you for your consideration, and I have copies for you. And attached to each one, you will find this, which is I am not a photographer. I don't know how to use Photoshop or anything like that. This is a picture of my backyard that I took February 1st in anticipation of last Monday's meeting from my bedroom window. You will see what looks like little hash mark kind of. It's a metal fence, sort of like chicken wire. That is currently the property line. So you'll be able to see, and the property where the bulk of where all the trees are, for the most part, is the land directly on 2 Beach Street Extension, and beyond that would be the property of 4 Beach Street Extension, because 2, as you know from looking at the lot maps, 2 runs directly parallel behind the Elm Street properties, and number 4 Beach Street Extension runs behind that. And thank you very much for your time and consideration. And I have one of these for...
Thank you.
That's a big help, thank you. Really helps Sue when she goes to do the minutes. Thank you.
One for you.
Get one for the front.
One for you, and yes, I do have one for you, sir.
Stu, before you sit down,
Give it to me beforehand. Your
Well,
name, please?
My name is Sue Bollier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's right there in the front. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I just finished composing it this afternoon.
hey, Sue,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sue, before you sit down, can I ask you a couple questions?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you might have some for me. Yes, sure.
Just because you've lived in town forever, so you may know.
Well, not as long as some of the other folks behind me have.
Close to forever.
I'm still a relatively newcomer compared to some of my folks
What?
behind me here, but I will try and answer your questions.
And if you don't know the answer, that's fine.
Okay.
When I think of New Village, somebody says New Village, I
Yeah.
think of the area that's basically between Beach and Cedar and Elm. Is that?
Yes.
Is that
But
what
I do
you
not-
think of as New Village?
I think of that as New Village, but I do not think of Elm Street as New Village because you do not go into the village. What I consider Beach Street going into the village, and maybe from Elder Street back as Beach Street circles around, becomes Cedar Street and comes back out the village. But in my interpretation, the homes that are on Elm Street, directly across the street from me, are not in the village because you have never entered into the village to go to those homes or my home on Elm Street.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And my second question and last question is, do you, in your experience and knowledge of living in the area for a long time there, the the statement's been made here that the majority of dwellings in the village have 3 or more residential units. Is that your understanding?
No. I know
Okay.
there are some, but it's my, when I think of the village, I think of the village as having duplexes or single-family homes. I know there are a few that have, that might have some additional, but I don't think of it that way. I have always thought of the village as mostly duplexes with some single families, and if there are a spot, few others.
Yep.
The bulk of the when I think of the high density in that area, I think of the apartment complexes that are way in the back, the Twin Rivers and all of that, which were not part of the village originally when it was built, and are not considered part of the village now, as far as I know. They were built north of the village,
Okay,
is my understanding.
this is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Look.
Sue took a lot more than 3 minutes, so take as much time as you need.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take so long.
No, that's
it's
fine.
okay. I can speed this up so everybody else gets the
And,
chance.
Mr.
These are for you.
You're gonna get an additional chance.
Okay, no, you just asked questions about the number of 2, 3, 4 units.
Yeah, and,
We have a map that shows it, and the majority are 3 or more units.
okay, well, we're gonna come back to that, because we do wanna address this point. I'll
Okay,
give you a chance to address it, Mr.
my name is David Bullier. I live at 59 Elm Street, right next to Sue. I see the same thing she sees out her backyard. And I have these for you. I am a lifetime resident here. I was out for a few years while I was married. And while I was married, I was still here as well as part of it. And I have these copies for you guys. And I'm not going to regurgitate what Sue said, because I agree with everything she said. We see the same things. I don't need to regurgitate it to you, but
Okay.
consider it.
Thank you.
I have another one.
You gonna pass it along? Yeah. Put it in. We'll do it for the record. Can you make a note on the photograph of Sue's? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bullier. Carry on.
Oh, you're welcome. So I'm not going to regurgitate everything, because it'll be identical except for maybe a few points. So I'm going to cover those few points to be added to it, because I have some things that are a little different. I believe that criterion 2, by being changed to 12 units, would absolutely be not keeping with the spirit of the ordinance, and therefore it's incorrect to say that. In changing the spirit of the ordinance, I believe it should not be granted. The idea of substantial justice. Look, we're not part of the village, and granting a variance would substantially be an increase to the density to all the abutters and not follow criterion 3. Granting the variance would create an injustice and does not follow the rules of criterion 3. Therefore, the variance should be denied due to lack of proof exhibited by the applicants. Variance 4, there's a lot of stuff in there. Sue touched on the setbacks and the 50-foot. I'm not going to repeat it, but I find the statement to be self-serving, misleading, and does not provide me any adequate or the abutters any benefit. She did touch on the existing buffered area. I don't know if you're going to cut the existing trees or you're going to put new trees in. I have no idea. So that's a question I have. The other thing is, I don't know if people realize there is a large breed habitat that would be destroyed by cutting the trees. We have anywhere from 2 to 5 deer out there pretty consistently. They were there on the 4th that night, and they walked all around the properties. The other thing is I had over 20 turkeys go through the land in January, and I see them quite often. So it does have a natural bed down area for the larger breed animals that do come and go from there. The thing about Elm Street, what I see is Main Street, Packers Falls Road. Elm Street is a cross street. If you wanted to go from one side of town to the other side of town, I never enter the village going down Elm Street at all. And I think that granting the variance would diminish the value of the surrounding properties, the quality of life loss, and the privacy to the abutters, and is not in the spirit of criterion 4, therefore the variance should be denied. Criterion 5 is another big one. Sue did touch on it, and I believe it's a self-imposed hardship. I couldn't have said it any better. I have some items of concern that I don't know if people have thought about or even considered it. We're looking at 24 more vehicles or more for the 12 units. That's a lot of vehicles on that street. And the other thing is the added vehicle traffic would create issues leaving up by here by the town hall here, trying to get out where the bridge is and the cars. It's already hard to add that many cars. People are going to seek alternate route. Pine Street's going to be one of those. So you're going to fill up the other side streets with other issues of high travel that is not high travel right now. You're also looking, as Sue said, 24 to 48 plus people, depending on how big the units are and how big the families are. That's a small piece of land to put that many people on. I see a noise pollution increase, light pollution, possibly crime rate increase, as would happen when they built down on the other side of the village up towards the river. I had problems on my land. I had people trying to steal my welding cables. I had kids from there playing baseball on my land. I come home, they're all out there, and it's just unnecessary. The other thing I question is stress on the town water supply. Right now, I believe there's evidence we are experiencing a shortage due to there always seems to be a stage 2 ban. So if there's always a stage 2 ban, which is an odd even day use, there's got to be some kind of problem that we're trying to conserve enough to get through any droughts we have. So I have that as a concern. The U.S. Geological Survey states the average person water use is 80 to 100 gallons per day per person. I thought that was high, but that's what I'm finding everywhere as I look. Using the low figures from the survey, 24 people use 700,800 gallons a year. 48 people use over 1.4 million gallons. So I don't know how our water supply is, but I already see the bans put on every year. Matter of fact, I think it was October 5th, 2016, in the town notes, we were at stage 4, and we as a town were thinking of banning the people that have private wells, or at least trying to curtail them. So it tells me there might be some kind of problem here that we should fix first before we allow something like this to happen. I also wrote the stress on the sewer system. I have no idea what we're capable of. I'm just bringing it up. I see it as a major and substantial loss of personal privacy. I've been here all my life, and I've been on this property 34 years. The amount of dirt that's talked about is a natural hill with an elevation of approximately 28 feet. My concern is, that's its highest point. My other concern is blasting. That hill is riddled with ledge. I have ledge on my land right now that wasn't there 34 years ago. It's coming up to the ground. So the ledge is moving, and it is a lot of ledge. My concern for that is underground pipes, the old pipes, and the ledge behind 57 Elm Street, David and Paula Mowers, could be dislodged by blasting. In final summary, and I'm just going to read this because it's easier. I find the applicant's criteria statements to increase the density is not in compliance with the intentions of criterions 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 as set forth. If the variance is granted, I see no improvement to or for the neighborhood, the abutters, the public, or the town of Newmarket. If the variance is granted, the hardships that will be created will be only on the abutters, neighborhood, the public, and the town of Newmarket. I am certain, with more investigative attitude into this matter, will reveal other issues not being evaluated at this time. I do see major and substantial hardships for all the abutters directly affecting our quality of life and a major loss of privacy if the variance is granted. The applicants have not met the burden of proof for a variance of this nature. Therefore, by the rules of the criterions 1 through 5, applicants have not proven their case for a variance of this magnitude. I urge the zoning board to keep the present spirit of the ordinance by denying the variance as it is written. One other thing I found while I was looking around is a map that's produced by Newmarket, March 24th, 2004, and updated by Stratford RPC, January 8th, and it is a wetlands map. Okay, and I have some questions on that. They talk about the prime wetlands buffer, which is a 75-foot area around the wetlands. I have the map here I will give you. I have some other documents I will submit in a few minutes. So I have that map in the area where our lots are. I also have a blow-up of that map, and the buffered area actually runs into 107. And that buffered area states it's 75 feet buffer area with a 100-foot structure setback and 125-foot septic setback, which I don't think we have to worry about. This town sewer there, I believe. So my concern is a 100-foot structure setback may already be, we may be over the line on lots 107. So with that said, I'm going to give you this too. I think you guys have that actually.
I think we have the wetlands maps. It's
Yeah,
all up,
yeah.
the material, so.
Yeah, I put it in the packets.
Okay.
What I did put in the packets is behind David Mauer's property, that's the ledge. I'll give you this in a minute.
And where is that property?
That's right behind, it's 57 Elm, it's right
57 Elm.
next to me. It's David and Paula Mauer's, I believe it's lot 109.
Okay.
I took a picture from my properties just so that, you know, I didn't know if anybody was going to, and I will give you that in a minute. And what I'd like to show you, similar to Sue, and I don't have Windows 10, so I couldn't do what I wanted. This is what I see out my backyard. That is what I see. That's all the way from David Mauer's here, all the way over to Sue's. I see nothing but woods and trees, and I actually, a few weeks ago, I almost ran into the buck. We were about 25 feet from us, scared the heck out of us. So that's what it's, that's what I see in my backyard. Okay. This is going to be changed. 90% of this will be gone.
Can we have that?
Yes, you may.
It's helpful for the record. Thank you.
Huh? There you go. The other thing I have here, some signatures, opposing signatures of what I think there's 14 or so, and if anybody wants to sign, I do have copies that they can sign.
It's helpful if the addresses are on there as well, are they?
We have all of them. They're all in here.
Oh, we have them already?
We have all of them in here.
Oh, you have to do that. You have in the package.
Okay. You want to mark that up somehow? That'd be Mr. Boyer's.
I want to thank you all for your time. And like I say, that was supposed to be an 11-minute spiel if I went through everything. It probably was, but I didn't catch everything. Sue caught a lot. So there's a lot of duplication here that I didn't really want to touch on too much.
Okay.
And I want to thank the neighborhood for the concerns and support. I really do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Thank you for coming out.
I also, I have a copy for you folks if you want. Thank you. You're welcome. Anybody else need copies? And they can get my number from the town. Feel free to call me.
Right, it's Mauer. Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jamie Batcher, and I live across the street at Beach Street Extension, at 3 Beach Street Extension. So, unlike the rest of the people here, I'm relatively new. So I've been in Newmarket 5 years, and so I just wanted to I've already submitted a letter to you. I just wanted to talk more from the heart about how I feel about this. So my wife and Talisha and I live at 3 Beach Extension, which is directly across the street from the proposed building site. I've already written a letter to the board regarding my thoughts about the variance, but I'd like to say a few words about Newmarket as a whole and what drew us to this place in the first place. So after living in Dover for 12 years, Newmarket was a breath of fresh air. The idea that a town could exist in the 21st century and not have a single traffic light was a huge selling point for us, and we knew we had found the town we wanted to spend the rest of our lives in. We've rented many apartments along the way in New Hampshire, and when we were finally ready to buy our first house, we couldn't be happier to find an area where just walking down the street would be greeted with a smile and hello from strangers young or old. Now, this might not be taken for granted by some of you here tonight, It was a very big reason on the reason we settled here in Newmarket. So in saying that, what concerns us most about the proposed variance for the condos is we really don't see how 12 to 24 parked cars could not have an impact on the already steady flow of traffic on this road. Residents on our road connect to Route 152 from Beach Street Village area, and since there are not many homes in the Beach Street extension, cars tend to speed through the section as well. Also, the L&M convenience store on the corner creates a bottleneck for parking on both sides of the street, and this section of road is always at risk for accidents, especially with the increased population density being proposed. Condos across the street will only contribute to increasing noise, add more traffic, more light pollution, more pavement, and less trees. This would be without a doubt an eyesore for us and would be against all that we have come to know and love about this town. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. And we do have your written comments, and we have read them, so we appreciate that. Anyone else for public comment at this time?
Kristen Keyfaber, 50 Elm Street. I'm just going to speak really quickly to growth. I'm also a teacher as well as a resident. I've lived here not quite as long as my husband, but almost as long. We bought our house together in 1991. But I caution you all progress and growth is going to happen in this town. We're going to grow, it's going to happen, but we have a master plan in place for a reason so that we only grow so fast. I'm sure some of you are aware of the growth problems we've had with the school and trying to react to that in a timely manner, and it's taken us several decades to get the ad reno that we have at the high school right now, and we don't want exponential growth in our town. And just willy-nilly allowing people to triple their occupancy on their lots of land is not going to be in keeping with the town plan, the greater plan, what people have put a lot of thought into that know more about it than I do. But I do recommend highly that you follow the zoning. There's no clear hardship here. They can build 2 beautiful duplexes, which would be in keeping with the neighborhood, or leave a single residential if they want to benefit the town. The best thing they can do is build a single residential. You get more tax dollars per student ratio. It costs a lot of money. You know, they talk about big bucks for revenue, but it also costs a lot to educate our children in town here, and we have to keep in mind the revenue going out as well as the revenue coming in. So the other little just side thing is the back abutter to this property is the railroad. So there's actually abutters on the other side of the railroad. If the railroad was a road, they would have been notified, but because the railroad is owned by the railroad, the people behind never got notification, and they don't know that there's a huge apartment condo complex maybe going in there, and I'm not sure if that is the best interest of keeping things on the up and up in town. So I don't know if that's something we can consider, but just a note. Thank you for your time, and I encourage you not to grant this variance.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Keyfaber. Any further public comment at this time? Once? Okay, what I'm going to do, Mr. Ford, is give you a chance to respond to what you've heard, and we're happy to hear you. And I'm going to ask you to address the same questions that I asked Mr. Ford. So
Sure.
I'm happy to hear you.
Miss and Bulow, how do you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, excuse me for my French, or lack of it. I just want to bring up the point that most of her comments are planning board issues. They are not issues for the zoning board of adjustment, all right? And she talks about in her backyard, and there's a big hill. The hill will still be there. She owns the hill.
No, I do not.
Wait a minute.
I do not own the hill.
The rising part of the land,
Oh,
Not on my property.
hey, guys,
okay.
Mr. Ford, you can address your comments to us. We've heard everything.
Okay, well, again, we have a disagreement because I've walked the lot line, and the lot line goes right along the hill, all right? Because I understood that we were introducing a density that they were not accustomed to, I voluntarily offered to use a 50-foot side yard, our side yard, their backyard, and as a setback, and to leave that a forested setback. So I'm making an additional effort to provide them with a backyard which is forested and doesn't affect them. Now, but again, the majority of the point I want to make up is I'm leaving an additional side yard setback that's 3 times or more than required by the zoning ordinance, and I'm trying to accommodate my neighbors and leave a forested backup, so when they look out their windows, they see a forested area. I also agreed to have no structure within 100 foot of their primary residence. So this is quite a substantial difference in the zoning that requires 15 feet, all right? But again, majority of her comments were planning board oriented, traffic, things like that. We talk about parking on the road. There's no intention to park on the road. The road's not designed for parking. If we want to talk about the abutters is a municipal building. Our land is abutted by a municipal building and a railroad, all right? And so it's not like we have a pure residential neighborhood. We have a neighborhood which has varied uses. I guess that's about it. Again, traffic's brought up and like that. I think there's a unique opportunity to make a positive contribution to the town. It's a relatively large lot, right, or it could be. If we build it, it'll be great because we'll have a nice multifamily development in there. It'll be sustaining, it should be supporting revenue, and it'll be helping the town. If it's denied, right, and again, the application to the board shows why we qualify for the issuance of the variance. But if it's denied, then my son will build a house or put a trailer on it, and the blue one will last. And is that where we want this town to be going? Thank you very much.
Mr. Forta, before you sit down, I wanted to give you an opportunity, and you mentioned that you had a map.
Oh, yeah, I've got a map that shows the uses, and there's 2, 3, and 4 families in the village. And that's excluding the backside, where Cheney's development is. That's not the village. That wasn't included in our count.
Sure, so
And
I'd like to see the map that you're referring
Yeah.
to, because that statement really jumped out at me. It's something that I wasn't sure of, because this is not the first application we've looked at in New Village in the past several years.
yeah, this is my only copy, and it's a working copy. But
So what am I looking at?
this is the number of units. This is a duplex, triplex. All right, here's a fourplex, a fourplex. You got a fourplex here. These numbers is the number of units per.
Understood. I'm gonna pass this around if you don't mind. They're here. So I'm gonna. Can pick it up tomorrow. I'm gonna make a note. This is a subject lot here. And this is a subject lot here.
And remember, the zoning board of adjustment is a unique board because the state constitution recognizes the natural inequity that exists in zoning regulations. And it's up to the board to weigh that. It's a judgmental board, to weigh the plus and minuses, what the intent of the zoning is and what the effect is on the members. And in that regard, they've established the 5 criteria. So it's a unique board. You have a unique charge in our system of law. And I think our application is self-explanatory. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further public comment? Mr. Bulyev, very briefly, and if you can respond to specific things that he addressed, because we've heard everything you've had to say, believe me.
I would like you to read everything, because I didn't say everything,
Okay.
okay?
We
That's
have-
what I would like you to do.
We've read everything that we have to date. I haven't had a chance to
unfortunate
study
for the
everything that you've
applicant, but I
submitted.
disagree with you, because I've lived here for 34 years. That's
That's
what it is. And it is about the law, and the zoning the way it is should stay the way it is.
Understood.
This is going to create a hardship for the people that directly apply.
Understood.
And one other thing I would comment on on yours, 100-foot setback, you're using part of my land mass to say you're 100 foot from my structure. I reside on that whole piece of property.
Understood.
All right?
I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further public comment? We haven't had a chance to read everything that's just been handed up tonight. We just haven't had a chance to. But we have heard everything you've had to say. Everything that everyone has had to say, and we've taken a long look. We did have a number of objections in the record before that we had last week, and I know we all read it. And there have been a number of comments that, you can construe as being maybe really planning consideration, but our job here is to just gather up all the evidence, and we consider the evidence in light of the criteria that we have to apply. So we pay special attention to things that relate to hardship, the value of surrounding property, substantial justice, the spirit of the ordinance, and substantial justice. So that's the filter through which, and we've been around long enough that we can understand the difference between what's relevant and what's irrelevant in terms of the evidence that we present, in terms of our really limited power in these cases. We're not a super planning board. We don't decide whether development is a good idea or a bad idea, but simply whether the applicant has met the criteria of the ordinance, and that's what we're asking you to trust us to do. So with all that in mind, if there's no further public comment, I'm going to close the public comment. Oh, there's not? Yes, sir.
Are you accepting additional written comments? Or is it too late for that?
If you have written comments, please hand them up now. You got just in time before I close the public comment portion of the hearing. And if you can tell us who you are and where you live?
Yes, my name is Mike Hickey. I'm a bit of an interloper. I live on the other side of town over on Cushing Road. But I pass by this neighborhood a lot on my way to Durham. And I'm looking at it from a planning standpoint, certainly from a ZBA standpoint.
Thank you.
And my view is that the neighborhood in question is a real gem. I've lived in a lot of different places in the wooded environment, and the primarily single and multi and duplex environment is one I think that should be preserved. So I'm hopeful that the ZBA will think first do no harm and really take a close look at the 5 criteria and how people have responded tonight and judge accordingly. So no other comments, but an interested citizen, even though I'm over on Cushing Road.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you for taking the time. His name is Mike Hickey. It's in the document.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it. I was looking for it in big letters.
I'm just going to take his, I'm sorry, Mr. Forwarda.
One other comment. Last week, a letter was given to you, signed by Sarah Calacan and Brian Hart.
Yes,
I believe
We
they
do have
live
that.
in Durham. I believe they are not residents of Newmarket. They own a property, but they do not live here.
understood.
Again, I don't know the rules. It was brought up.
Yeah,
That's the only reason I
to
mentioned it.
clarify, whether they live here or not, they own property. We have a number of people who own property in
Okay.
town who don't
No,
live
no,
here.
that's fine.
I hear you. I'm just going to take a second to read Mr. Hickey's, if you don't mind. Give us just a second. The last thing I'll note about the law of these things, aside from the 5 criteria that we're limited to considering, is that the ultimate burden is on the applicant to satisfy the criteria. So they have to present enough evidence to get them over the top, and that's something that we decide in our discretion under the law, whether they've done that sufficiently. Okay. Okay. Any further public comment at this time? I want to thank everybody for coming out. At this point, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the hearing, and we will proceed to deliberation. We've got a lot of evidence. Yeah, Mr. Forwarda, the information that's on the map that you submitted about the number of units per lot, just what's the source of that?
That's off tax cards.
Cross-reference to
Cross-reference to electric meters on the structures.
Okay.
So there
You went
could
tax card
actually
by tax
be,
card.
there could actually be more dense unreported
Sure.
apartments there.
Understood.
And I think that's occurred quite a bit in the village.
All right, so we're making a note on that document of what the source of the data was, because I think it's important for us to know. Okay. Any further, any comments, deliberation at this point?
Well, I'd like to put the whole application in perspective.
Okay, sir?
The property located at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension are bounded in the north by 3 properties located at 57, 59, and 61 Elm Street. 1 and 3 on Beach Street Extension are all single properties. The buildings at 2 Beach Street Extension has been removed to the south at 6 Beach Street Extension. The property owned by the town of Newmarket is also in the R3 zone. 8 Beach Street Extension is south of Pine Street. The area changes the M2 zone with the town-owned vacant lot and business and residence. The town of Newmarket on the corner of Main and Beach Street Extension duplex on the other corner, M2 zone, are not relevant to the 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension. And that's just putting it in perspective. Back in I think it was October of 2014, we had a variance come before us on
The infill development.
infill development, which I've got it in the granting the variance should not be contrary to public interest, but I don't think we want to go into that just yet, do we? And I think we ought to get my position is to deny the application,
Okay. Because,
because I've got it all in my
Okay.
notes.
all right.
And in fact, I could make motions from them.
Why don't you go ahead, and then we can deliberate around your motion
Okay.
if you want to do that at this time.
Granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest. The applicant is requesting the variance utilizing the density in the original New Village area, that the homes located from 1 to 25 Beach Street on the east side continued on to Cedar and connected to Elm Street. The interior of that area was built out in the early 1900s, except for one interior lot that remained undeveloped and came before the zoning board October of 2014 under the master plan, sustainable development and land use. The promotion of compatible infill development as infill application, the applicant's property at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension in the R3 zones, situated amongst 5 single-family properties and adjacent property owned by the town of Newmarket, are all in the R3 zone. There is no relevant connection to the applicant's properties as an infill development with the densities of the new village. The applicant's proposed variance of 6 units, multifamily dwellings per acre, is out of character of the neighborhood and contrary to the public interest.
There's 2 permits.
Here's a couple of these. Under the spirit of the ordinance is observed because by the orderly development in the R3 zone that allows the reduction from 1 acre in the R1 zone to 1/2 acre in the R3 zone, by allowing this greater density requested of 12 units where 4 units are permitted, will in a marked degree violate the spirit of the ordinance. The request of 12 units be denied. Granted, the variance would do substantial justice. On the merit to approve this request variance, it must meet the other 4 variants requested by the applicant to approve. If not met, the variance fails. If the variance were granted, the value of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. If granted, the applicant states, we would enhance the value of surrounding existing properties as our new structures will replace 2 40-year-old single-wide mobile homes. No evidence to substantiate that statement, when in fact 12 units where 4 are allowed may have an adverse effect on the neighborhood in changing the environment and character of the area. Under unnecessary hardship, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of a variance will result in unnecessary hardship. No fair and substantial relations exist between the general public purpose of the ordinance provisions and the specific application of that provision to the property, because the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application to the property is to guide the character of growth, development, and change in order to provide for the public health, safety, and general welfare. Also stated, prevent overcrowding of land and avoid undue concentration of population. And under 2, the proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed use requested by the applicant is unreasonable, as the applicant's property has no special conditions resulting in unnecessary hardship. And I use Hanson versus Manning under a zoning board of adjustment case law that went through the courts. And it went on to grant a variance. Literal enforcement of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. It does so only when the hardship is owing to special conditions. Absent special conditions which distinguish the property from other property in the area, no variance may be granted over there even though there is a hardship. Explain how the criteria in subparagraph A are not established and a necessary hardship will be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to special conditions, the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance. And a variance is therefore necessary to enable reasonable use. Absent of special conditions that distinguish this 2-lot property from other properties in the area. These properties located at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension from other properties in the area are not unique in its setting. All properties are similarly burdened by the rail line. Abutting properties share the amount of dirt and ledge. And I had another zoning board case law under the hardship, Crossley versus the town of Pelham. In that particular case, the ZBA granted Crossley, the town of Pelham, represented the town of Pelham, agreed on a ZBA ruling, and the neighbors took them to court. It went through the Superior Court, and the Superior Court agreed with them, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court summarized that the ZBA made a mistake in that. And the end of that was the applicant's neighbors had homes also on undersized lots, which could not accommodate a 2-car garage without variance relief. If the land is reasonably suited for a permitted use, no hardship can be found and no variance can be granted, even if the other 4 parts of the 5-part test for the granting of the variance has been met. So that is my, on the 5 variances.
Thank you, Rich. So that is,
Is that a motion?
that is your motion to.
Well,
So in the back
well,
is
I
this
don't know
formal
if you
motion.
want me to make a motion at this time, or do other people
Well,
want to
you can-
talk on it?
I mean, it's-
Why don't
if
you
wanna
make the
vote
motion,
that.
and we can have
Okay.
discussion. and
I
we'll
make
see
a
if it gets
motion that the
seconded.
factual findings of the ZBA's decision is not unlawful or unreasonable, and that the evidence as presented by the applicant does not support the variance from section 3289 of the Newmarket zoning ordinance to permit a density of 12 multifamily resident units where 4 are allowed, and that the application requesting the variance be denied. The lots are located at 2 and 4 Beach Street Extension, tax map U2, lots 107 and 108 in the R3 zone.
So that's a motion to deny the variant, deny the application. Is there?
Second that to get discussion going.
Okay, I have a second. Is there further discussion? Steve?
Okay, so 2 things. Let me ask you this. There's a variance, the application says this, a variance is requested from section 3289 of the Newmarket zoning ordinance to permit a density of 6 residential units per acre, where 2 residential units per acre is allowed. And there's a request for a second variance that says a variance is requested from section 3256, table of permitted uses, to permit a multifamily residential use. So the
Right.
second one, we're not taking up, right?
The second one is
And
not
that's
necessary because multifamily uses are permitted.
It's permitted by these current
So
zoning.
really, we only have one
Right.
variance request before us
Right,
this
that's all I
evening.
listed.
And so
That's
then-
all, and
so
that's all that
why
Rich
the mo-
referenced.
Okay.
Because if it's 2 units per acre, then that by definition is multifamily. Was there anything else, Steve?
Just when I looked at the application and when I listened tonight, I agree with the analysis, particularly about hardship. The other, I had issues with criterion 3 too. Granting the application says granting the variance would do substantial justice because, and this is, granting this variance would allow construction of multifamily dwellings consistent with the uses and dwelling density of the existing dwellings in the village. That to me, I think the argument must be that granting the variance is consistent with the present use of the surrounding properties, but it's certainly not made clear here. It was made abundantly clear in the presentation, and it doesn't. That doesn't carry the day for me. I don't think I agree with what Rich wrote, but I just wanted to add that because it's not. It really jumped out at me, when I was reading through this. There's one sentence in there to deal with that criteria, and just didn't.
When you look at criteria 3.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not the last criteria, because you can't get one way or the other the variance 3 until you know what the other 4 are.
Yeah.
You've got to either prove it or disapprove it. If they all agree, then substantial justice is done either way.
Right.
And they never did change it around. And that's how I've always read it, and I know that's what it is. Substantial justice is
It's a
done
$5 fine.
when the criteria is completely met.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but
So-
I think what they were trying to get at with the consistent of the uses and dwelling density. I think that's what he submitted with the pink highlighted marks is that he was trying to illustrate what the
Yes.
what the dwelling densities were in that area. Is that correct? Is that what he was trying for?
I think that's what he was trying to illustrate.
Yeah, in the
I didn't
criteria
hear what
3.
he said.
What
So
he's saying
the-
is the map that was submitted with the densities of the other properties in New Village
Right.
is
They're all undersized.
James is interpreting that as the applicant's attempt to address this criteria of the multifamily dwellings being consistent with the uses and dwellings in New Village. Whether you accept it or not, that's what he's trying to do.
I thought that was my interpretation. Is that the support that he was trying to put for his argument in criteria 3 was he was trying to back that up with the highlighted village densities in the map that he submitted
Right.
tonight.
I would say that's a fair
Fair reading of it.
reading of it, yes.
All right.
Yeah. Bob?
Now, what I've come up with is that the applicant came in here and made a number of attempts to appease the abutters, saying that, I've increased the setbacks, I've done this, I've done that. But we're a board here that deals with the facts, and we're not the planning board. Those are planning board issues, and what we have to do is look at the lot and what's there. Any promises that are made by the applicant here today are not binding to him at the planning board, so he can do whatever he damn well pleases when he gets to that point. New Village is not a comparable comparison, because that's a historic area. It was built to house mill workers, and you could actually go down through the New Village area and you could see the status of the various employees by the units they're living in. And it's a unique trait there, and to try and say that, well, they got higher densities there, it's not applicable. It's built in a completely different time, and the densities there don't apply. And what strikes me is the failure to provide any evidence of the unique nature of these lots. There's nothing on those lots that is unique that would say, oh, I need the densities because, I've got to overcome this challenge, or either this is done so that we can work with the unique characteristic of the lot. My lot's got all kinds of rock on it too, but I'm not asking for 12 units, so. In my opinion, you failed to address how the lot is unique and why the hardship, because of the unique nature of the lot, occurs. The only thing in reading the whole thing, the only thing that came up to my mind was you just want to make more money, and greed is not a consideration for warranting a hardship. So that's where I stand on it.
James?
I can't in good mind accept it. My big thing was the increase in population. It didn't seem like the building would be in alliance with what is in the surrounding area, and I think it's just too much for the land. I do 100% agree with the sewage and water arguments. When I read the application, that was a big. I didn't do the math. I didn't do the research as was presented, but I just thought, how much do 24 up to 48, maybe more, depending on how the units are used. I mean, that's a lot. Plus, what we experienced a few years ago with the drought. Newmarket has always been a little bit of concern. I've been here for 5.5 years now, and most of them I've been in a drought. I'm thinking, oh geez, if we add that much more people, I know it's maybe 50-ish, but yeah, that much more pressure on the system. What does that mean? That's for minds much smarter than me, but just looking at the analysis of what would be added to the system, those are the big things that stuck out to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and the character of the neighborhood was a big one too. I mean, that to me, the village section of the R3 zone is only a portion of the R3 zone. The subject lots are surrounded by other homes, not just New Village. And looking at the surrounding properties, particularly on the south side of Beach Street there, the character of the neighborhood is largely single-family home, and I guess also manufactured homes. But still, in my opinion, to grant a variance allowing 2 6-unit multifamily dwellings on those properties would be inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm just going to highlight a few things for myself. I agree with a lot of what's been said. For me personally, the water and sewer is not a significant consideration because we've had no objection from Public Works or anything.
Okay.
And we have added water and sewer, but that's incidental. My difficulties with the application, just to emphasize really what's already been said, as I read the application, it's, gee, this is New Village light. This is a lot like New Village. New Village has all these densities. Therefore, I'm entitled to a variance. In my mind, there's no connection between this application and New Village. This property's not in New Village. That's a distinct area. It's geographically separated from this area. I don't think anybody here, and this is why I asked Silboya the questions, thinks of the south side of Elm Street as being part of New Village. So I don't think it's just not a relevant comparison. Bob has alluded to that New Village was created under unique circumstances, and I think that's right. And more importantly, the current zoning is very different than it was back then. I don't know if New Village could be recreated now if we were starting from scratch. Because the zoning is different, we have to deal with the zoning and the condition that it's in and the evidence that we have. So I also, and this is something that's been alluded to and I totally agree with, I don't see any connection between the conditions. I don't see any unique conditions of the property and its setting, as has been alluded to, or any connection between those conditions and the significantly higher density that's being sought here. The application is for 2 6-unit structures. We've seen tonight maybe it's 3 4-unit structures. To me, it's tomato and tomato.
It's a planning board issue.
It's a planning board issue anyway, as Rich would remind me. But still, the densities are significantly higher than is allowed under the zoning. is a point I'm trying to make. So, I don't think hardship has been hit. I don't think spirit of the ordinance has been hit, for the reasons alluded to. I don't think public interest has been hit, and I think there is a significant question based on the comments from the abutters about the value of the surrounding properties. I think you have to respect the opinions of the abutters, particularly when there's many abutters with the same objection and that kind of an issue. And I haven't seen evidence to suggest different, except you're going to have nicer structures than the current until recently current mobile home structures. So for those reasons, I agree that the variance should be denied. Any further discussion? All those in favor of denying the application based on the comments that have been made, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's unanimous. Okay. Are there any new or old business to come before the board at this time? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Seconded.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, we're adjourned.